It's nearly the end of summer, which truly breaks my heart to say, but it is. That's the truth of the matter. And one beautiful thing about this time of the year is the fact that there's loads of blackberries growing everywhere in London. I have like a wild blackberry patch or whatever growing near my studio in a little park next to me. And I had a look yesterday and realized that there's quite a few that are ready now, which I ate and thought, this is kind of gross, I should wash these. But there's also lots that are nearly ready. So I have decided that I'm going to make a berry bowl so that I can pick them and then bring them back here to my studio, give them a wash and eat them. Because listen, I live in London and London is a cesspit. So I really do think I should be washing them before I eat them. It's just kind of gross, you know, it's gross. Once that's done, once the season's over, RIP, it's going to be time for pasta because we'll be feeling cozy and I can use it as a colander. So I can drain my pasta in this berry bowl or colander, whatever we're going to call it. So yeah, I'm going to get started. So what I need to do today is I'm going to wedge some clay up and then I'm going to throw it on the wheel. On the wheel, I'm just going to throw like a nice wide shallow bowl and then hopefully it will dry enough today to trim. It is a really hot day today, so fingers crossed, we might be in luck. And then I'm going to trim it, make sure it has a foot ring so that when I wash the berries or whatever, it can obviously drain. And once it's trimmed, that's kind of the important part, which is when I need to put holes into my bowl. So I will draw some lines to kind of guide me where I need to go. And then I'll use a hole cutter or a drill bit maybe, and I will cut some holes into my bowl and then it has become a colander. Then I think I'll probably add some handles to it because that's cute. They probably won't be super functional, but they will be cute for sure. And then I'll fire it and then I will glaze it in something that will I don't know, make the berries pop, and then fire it again, and then it will be ready for me to enjoy the last little bits of summer, which is nice. It's nice and sad. Maybe it's a nice sort of end of summer anyway,
ritual,
so that's the plan.
doing some foraging.
I'm going to get to it. So as I mentioned, we're going to start our berry bowl by making a lovely wide shallow bowl. This, of course, is up to you. If you want to have something deeper, then please go for it. But for me, I want something that, like, the berries can kind of air dry by themselves and it becomes a bowl in itself, if that makes sense. So I want it to be nice and wide. That's what I fancy. So I've weighed up my clay, which is about 1,100 grams, about 2.4 pounds of clay. This clay is actually incredibly hard. I wish it was softer for making something bigger, but it is what it is. We're dealing with clay from the bag, and sometimes it's just harder than you'd like. And if it was soft, then I'll tell you what, it would be a lot easier to center. But for me, I really had to battle with this. I'm really putting my whole body into centering, and I've cut a lot of it out because truly it was just kind of boring. The trick with using hard clay is to make sure that you really squeeze your fingers as you push it around. The squeezing helps to kind of prepare the wall of your left hand as it comes round to it, and it also helps to kind of feel where needs more work. It's very tempting to add loads of water to hard clay when you're centering, but I find that it's actually way easier to use the slip that is created. It goes way further. And hard clay is hard to begin with, but it actually means that it's slightly more sturdy when it comes to widening, so, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. The trick with throwing something wide is using enough clay to support the shoulder as you widen. With bowls, I like to get enough height before I pull it out to the width that I want, so that gravity isn't trying to pull it down as the clay stretches out. It's much easier to pull it up and then out. So I have the measurement that I want and I have the height that I want. So I'm just going to finish everything off by removing some of the slip and wiring it off the wheel now. That way when it dries it will either release itself or it will be easier to wire through later if it's not unsticking. I like to have the wheel going as I do this for wider things. I don't really know the science behind this, I just feel like it's the right thing to do. Everyone kind of does it this way. When it's something small I have the wheel not moving, but when it's something wider I do have it spinning just really slowly. If anyone can tell me why we do that, please do. Please enlighten me. I was hoping that these bowls would dry in the day that I threw them, but sadly it wasn't warm enough to do that. So I did end up coming back the next day to trim them. But before I went home, I was able to just wire underneath and flip them over. They were dry enough to move, but you know, still kind of tacky on the bottom, definitely too tacky to be able to trim. So I flip them over and then just pop them on the shelf to dry uncovered overnight. Summertime in the studio is so nice. It's such a relaxed energy, the windows open, the fan's on, and bowls like this are ready to trim within a day. In the winter time when it's cold and more humid in my studio, these bowls could take a few days to even a week maybe to dry enough to trim. So being able to trim these within 24 hours is just beautiful. I'm going to start off today by making a couple of handles because I want to use handles later. So I just make a couple of slab handles and let them dry on this rolling pin. I trim this bowl in the same way that I would trim any bowl, making sure that there's a nice wide foot ring so it's well balanced. I'm also mindful of how wide the foot ring is. As I'm making a couple of these, I want them to be the same. I'm obviously going to only take one of these home, but it's good to kind of make things sort of similar batch by batch. If you want to see a whole video about how I make these bowls and how I trim them, you can click here. Once I have finished trimming, then it's time to draw some guidelines for where I'm going to put my holes. So I use just a pin tool or kind of anything that I've got around to make some guidelines. And I hold my tool steady as it's going around and I just draw some concentric lines from the middle all the way out. And then once I've done that, I draw some kind of intersecting lines all the way through. And I cut the holes where these lines meet. On the wall of the colander, or the berry bowl, I sort of stagger the holes so that there's a bit of a pattern to it. This takes such a long time. I've obviously fast forwarded this and cut a lot of it out because I want to keep you around. I respect you and I respect your time, but this truly takes so long. The next thing is to sponge the guidelines off, and this will generally bring all the grip of the clay to the surface, and I find that's fine. The glaze seems to cover that, but if you don't like that, then you may just want to use a rib. Score and slip, and I press them on quite firmly. Use whatever tool I've got around, generally a knife tool, to smooth the slip from around the edges. Go in with a sponge and I clean everything up, and then I repeat exactly the same thing on the other side. These handles aren't super functional. You can obviously use them, but something like a cup, you're really using them and you're thinking, this is helping my hand not get burnt. Something like a colander, it's really kind of just decorative. It's not super functional, it's not super useful, which means that it's optional. You really don't have to do it, but I just think it adds a little bit of interest and is, I don't know, they're kind of fun and silly. Sponge the rim to make sure that's nice and flat. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I regret doing this part. I've smoothed the inside of the holes with my rib tool, and then I go in with my pin tool to get rid of any of the clay that's kind of gone into the holes. And then I sponge it, and then I do this entire process with the pin tool again. The reason I regret this is because it's easier just to do it when it's dry, because the clay doesn't end up kind of filling the holes and smushing itself in, it just kind of flakes off. So do as I say, not as I do in this instance. You can obviously do it, you maybe would get really clean holes, but I just find that, I don't know, you end up kind of triple or quadruple handling this entire thing when you really don't need to. That is the making part of the colander complete. So it's time to pop this on the shelf and let it dry for about a week before putting it into the bisque firing. The point of a bisque firing is to remove any moisture from the clay, and then it becomes porous, but ceramic. So it's time to glaze on top of this stuff. Let's get it out of the kiln and see how it's gone. Obviously I wasn't patient enough to wait until it's cooled down enough to hold it, so I'm using my sleeves to protect my hands from getting burnt.
Okay, it's quite late in the day. It's 6 p.m. Fingers crossed that the lighting is okay. It looks all right from where I stood. Anyway, these have come out of the bisque firing. They look great. I'm just gonna glaze one, and the other one I'll keep on the shelf until I'm ready to glaze it and I know what I want to do with it. But I want the glaze to be something light so that the dark berries can kind of like pop. So I'm gonna go for my chalk glaze, which is this one here. So it's, get my face out of the way so it will focus. It's a really nice matte glaze and it breaks over these little speckles in a really nice way. And where it's thick, sometimes it goes kind of glassy, which is really beautiful. So that's the glaze I'm going to use for this. Usually with a bowl, I would do the pour and dip method. So I would like pour the glaze in, let it sit for a second, then pour it out, and then I would dip the bowl, or I would just dip the entire thing. Pouring obviously doesn't work in a case like this because there's holes in it and it will just drain straight out. But because this is too big for the size of my bucket, I have to think about how I'm gonna do it. So like there's a few options. You could paint it if you wanted. The risk of the holes filling up with glaze is a lot higher if you painted it, but you could always go in after, like get rid of the glaze if there's any pooling in the holes. What I'm gonna do is I've got like a big bucket. Let me get it. This big unsightly tub thing is usually what I put my clay in, so you can see there's like lots of clay in here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this out, and then I'm going to fill this up with glaze so that I can just kind of dip the whole thing in glaze, and that's how, fingers crossed, how it will work. Hopefully I've got enough glaze, hopefully that plan is all sound, but I think that should be fine. That's how I've done similar things in the past. So let's clean this out and then we will get the glaze out and ready.
Dipping this is quite a scary moment because I'm pretty sure, that there isn't enough glaze to cover the edges of my berry bowl. So I'm gonna just swirl it around in the glaze to cover the walls, and then when I take it out, I give it a few shakes and then I blow into the holes so that the glaze doesn't pull and end up blocking the holes. Dab a little bit of extra glaze onto the areas where I was holding it so that they are also covered in glaze. Flip it over and do the same on the bottom side. Then of course I need to remove the glaze that has pulled on the foot ring where it's going to sit on the shelf in the kiln. Otherwise anything remaining here will stick to the kiln shelf and it will be one with the kiln forevermore, and I don't want that. I noticed that there was one hole still filled with glaze, so I just went in with my pin tool and I poked that out. This is now going to go into the kiln at 1265 degrees Celsius, which is 2309 degrees Fahrenheit, around kind of cone 8, cone 9 temperature. I'll see you in a few days once the kiln has gone up, and then come back down and we'll see how it looks. Moment of truth is unloading. Here she is, my sweet new baby. And it looks amazing. I'm so happy with this glaze. There's a little bit of glassiness on the inside, but just the tiniest bit. It's mostly this beautiful creamy glaze, and the speckles look lovely, kind of blooming through underneath. Time to pop outside into the late summer sun and pick some berries.
It's so windy.
I'm really not into this.
This is a pretty fitting end to this summery video, with it absolutely not being summery today. It's giving autumnal, you know, which also I feel like blackberries give autumnal. Ow! I'm such a city girl now. My New Zealand roots are gone. Ow! Oh, I'm stuck. Really good ones just there. Ow! Oh.
Okay. Okay, so there's some good ones down here, but the rule is don't get them below waist height because animals and people are likely to have pissed on them. We're in London, it's a gross place, hence this whole berry bowl situation. We need to wash these, but I'm not gonna risk it with these. There is a real good looking one there, but it's too bad, too bad. This makes me so happy. Despite the weather, I'm feeling like fulfilled, getting some real nature time. Ow! I take it all back. Summer is well and truly packed its bags. It's freezing in London today, but that's life. You know, that's life in the big smoke. Regardless, I have managed to pick a few of these bountiful berries and they look really beautiful. I'm gonna take them inside now to give them a wash in my gross little studio sink, and then I'll snack on them throughout the day, and any that are left over I'll take home and make into a little apple and blackberry crumble, which is nice and cozy. Then I'm gonna take this bad boy home as well, and it will become a colander for the winter months, and it will drain many a pasta meal, which is gonna keep me cozy and warm. Fingers crossed actually, everybody, for a few more summery days. Truly, I'm not ready for summer to be done. I'm not ready for cold weather to kick in. It's too much. Hopefully you found this video useful and helpful, and maybe you're gonna make some nice colanders / berry bowls depending on the weather, and I'll see you again next week for another lovely warm pottery video. Goodbye. This is honestly a lot less bountiful than I was hoping. Ah well.